And we'll move on now to remote workflows for production and editing with Ray Thompson. Ray's our Director of Market Solutions for Broadcast and Media, with many years of experience focused on media for broadcast, post, and film. He led the development of an IP live streaming platform strategy for sending SD, HD, and 4K video over a standard IP connection from anywhere at broadcast quality and low latency to mobile and web. He's been a key driver in the transformation of a startup software company from video editing to content licensing, management, distribution of assets via the web to multiple audiences. We've seen a significant increase in demand for remote workflows, shifts to IP and cloud deployed environments. In this session, Ray will focus on what is currently possible in video post workflow using MediaCentral Cloud UX, Editorial Management, and Media Composer, what's coming just on the horizon, and where things can go longer term. So thank you, Ray.
Yeah, thank you, David. Great to be here, and I appreciate everybody's time today. So as David said, we're going to touch on sort of enabling remote work from home workflows, and then I'll touch on cloud and cloud editorial and how to basically spin that up very quickly. So certainly before COVID hit, the industry was experiencing significant digital disruption as a net result of the fact that consumers were demanding content delivered to either social or digital platforms, basically to their device, on their own time. And this was really having ripple effects, both operationally and economically, throughout media organizations of all kinds. So when COVID hit, it really, augmented those challenges and sort of put a light on the fact that industries really do need to pivot and pivot very quickly. So here in the US, for example, things shut down pretty significantly, right? Live sports were closed down, production ended and or was paused, Broadway shut down. And so Avid was really, first and foremost, wanting to help customers during this very difficult time. And so first and foremost, the company extended literally tens of thousands of licenses for users, either Pro Tools, Media Composer, or Sibelius, to name a few, to enable folks to have a free license for 90 days. So that was the immediate sort of response from the company. And then customers really asked us to assist them very quickly in order to enable folks to continue working from home. So what they wanted to do was either access on-prem environments in brick and mortar facilities from home, right, using client workstations. And then the other group wanted to use the cloud and really spin up an instance in the cloud and do remote editing also from home. And so those are really the two sort of buckets people kind of fell in immediately. And then as Craig already alluded to, Craig Dwyer, the sort of timeline for doing more elaborate workflows in the cloud, which pre-COVID was probably 2 to 3 years, was really sort of changed, right? And people said, let's get into the cloud and let's do it in 6 months as opposed to 3 years. And so that's really some of the significant changes we've seen. And really at the end of the day, what we found is that remote workflows are not only possible, but they're actually really good. So next slide. So let's start with remote workflows and the various different ways in which users can enable work from home. It really kind of falls into a couple different offerings. One is cloud remotes, the other is cloud VM, and the other is remote desktop solutions. And I'm going to touch on each one of those. The interesting thing to note about enabling remote workflows is that Avid has actually invested in this for quite some time. And you've been able to actually do these remote workflows for a number of years. This is a net result of investments made by Avid in things like virtualization and enabling customers to virtualize environments for on-prem, including things like Media Composer, while also building in a lot of the remote capabilities into the tool sets to access remote environments like MediaCentral and or Nexus sitting on-prem. And again, before COVID, when you thought about remote workflows, you were thinking, hey, I'm sitting on set and I want to basically be connected to the mothership, right? In this case, the Nexus and maybe asset management systems sitting back in the brick and mortar host facility, or maybe it's connected to a news station and or even maybe a data center. And I'm doing so while I'm out covering a story, right? So that was remote before COVID. post-COVID remote was everybody has to work from home. And so, again, the great news was a lot of the sort of technology groundwork had already been laid so that people could actually spin these up very quickly. So we were really fortunate with that. So next slide. So really, it fell into two major buckets, right? We had news and sports organizations who were desperate to enable folks to continue editing. Even though COVID was causing significant disruption in everybody's day-to-day lives, things like news had to continue on. And even though, you know, here in the US, we're going through another election season, and even though the candidates couldn't go on the road and do their typical events, there was still tons of news, of course, happening around the world around the crisis. And so people had to cover that news, and certainly they had to edit the content that was coming in and or being created. So this really forced news organizations to rethink not only how they sort of initiate content, but it also forced them to think of ways in which they can enable work from home scenarios so that they could continue to edit and produce content and ultimately get it to air. And that was no small feat. And then if you go to the next slide, it was the same in post. You know, before COVID, a lot of shows had already been filmed and or TV shows. And so people were either mid-edit, you know, in the middle of a project, or maybe they were just finishing shooting a series, a show, a film, an independent movie, or a documentary, and they were just getting ready to start editing. And now they couldn't go into where they normally would, which was a networked environment, complete with all the tool sets they would need in order to do a very, you know, very nice job in editing a piece of content and ultimately get it out to the platforms that we are all watching content on these days, right? OTT platforms. So next slide. So the way in which people were able to do this and do this very quickly falls into these different buckets. First and foremost, Cloud VM. Cloud VM is a Media Composer Ultimate seat that you can access using a Teradici client. It's basically running on a workstation sitting back inside of a brick and mortar facility, and it's connected to the Nexus storage back at the facility. So Teradici is giving you that secure remote access from a client at home, which allows you to then go ahead and run your Media Composer system as if it was sitting underneath your desk. The only limitations here really revolved around audio. But again, the performance that we found, especially through feedback from our customers, is that it's been very, very good. And that they actually feel like I said, that the workstation's actually sitting under their desk and not miles away sitting in their facility. The second option is cloud remote, where users actually need a little bit more capability in terms of not only accessing Media Composer, but the full production environment. And that's what cloud remote really allows you to do. You do need MediaCentral production management to enable this piece. And of course, there's lots of sites that have MediaCentral production management out there. But what this allows you to do is not only do editing, but also do things like transcoding and kick off transcode jobs, uploading, downloading content. You can certainly check in content into the production environment, and you can ultimately support things like sending it to playback. So that's another big difference. And again, when you look at the two scenarios, this is sort of the key differentiators and sort of what is ideal in terms of Cloud VM versus Cloud Remote, and what the key differences are. So if you look at Cloud VM, it's ideal for editors with older systems who need access to Media Composer and Media Composer Ultimate, whereas Cloud Remote is really ideal for camera crews and editors who need to upload content that was locally ingested in their system, put it into the production environment, and then use that environment as if they were sitting on-prem, and then ultimately even push it to air. And then last but certainly not least is the Media Composer Remote Desktop. This is the least expensive option, but it's also probably the most limited in terms of functionality. That isn't to say it isn't a good solution, but it's just to say that it's probably it's certainly for the budget conscious out there, but it also does allow you to do things like editing and do so from a remote client. So that's probably some of the big differentiators. And those are really the three scenarios that we found customers using in order to enable those work from home workflows. So then the next request came from customers saying, okay, this is great. I'm editing at home. I'm having a good experience, getting my work done. I'm producing content. One of my challenges, though, is I'd like to be able to see the output of Media Composer in a third monitor or for over-the-shoulder type review. And so there's a couple of different options that we're looking at to enable that. And they're all in sort of different phases, if you will, of qualification within Avid. And of course, these are all in POCs because, you know, everything's so moving so quickly these days. We have all of these being tried out by customers as we speak. So Haivision and SRT, so Avid and Haivision R&D partners. SRT is an open source protocol that basically securely delivers video over standard internet connections. And so you could basically take the output of a Media Composer, go to a Haivision encoder, and then send that over the internet to a decoder sitting either at your house or at another facility. And then you can go SDI out to a third monitor. You could also send it to a set-top box and go HDMI out to a standard monitor, or you could actually have a software-only option where you're actually using VLC player and you're just sending that SRT stream to the VLC player where it's playing it live native as the output of the Media Composer. So that's one option. The other option is Evercast, where you're streaming the entire desktop or a portion of the desktop. And you're basically looking at that output on a third monitor. And then, of course, Streambox, which is sort of a hybrid of both, where it's doing both the ability to do the screen as well as just the output. And so all of those have different price points. They all have different benefits, and all of them are currently being tested for use with remote workflow. All right, so now we're going to get into the second bucket of folks. So like I said, when COVID hit, we found there were two sort of constituents. One was the group that wanted to set up remote work from home scenarios, accessing on-prem environments. And then we had a second group that wanted to access content and actually spin up cloud instances. And we were fortunate timing-wise in the sense that we had already announced and had been working with Edit On Demand for quite some time. And it just turns out that in September of 2019 at IBC, we had rolled out Edit On Demand. And Edit On Demand is basically turnkey production in the cloud. It includes Media Composer running on VMs inside of Azure. It includes Nexus running on Azure Blob Storage. It includes the TerraDT client, the same TerraDT client we're using to access on-prem environments remotely from home. And then it includes File Catalyst to basically push content into and then ultimately download content from the cloud. So Edit On Demand had been a tech preview for a number of years, and we sort of announced it as an early access program at IBC, and there was good interest pre-COVID in the service, right? This is a service offering, so software as a service, turnkey in the cloud. And so once COVID hit, though, the interest went way up, and we had a significant number of folks who wanted to use Edit On Demand in real production as a way to get their work done. So if we go to the next one. So the reason why people were really interested in it is, one, you could spin it up and all the auto provisioning for all the cloud resources, including the VMs for the Media Composer instances and the Nexus file system, were all auto provisioned by the toolset. And while initially Avid engineers actually had to work with customers to set up those environments, over time, that installation was actually done by the consumer. And basically, long story short, you could have a production in the cloud setup using Edit On Demand in a matter of 4 hours. So it did all the auto provisioning. It basically stood up the environment, and it gave you a code, and you simply typed in the code, and now you were accessing through the TerraDT client the various different instances that came along with that subscription. Next slide. And so what this really did was it helped fill a massive need for remote workflows. So again, where consumers were sort of torn between either accessing on-prem environments or one in the cloud, Edit On Demand provided a lot of benefits. And again, you'll see in a video in a moment, which is a video testimonial from an outfit in the UK called Gorilla Productions. They actually were pretty blown away by the performance. And I think this is because, the instances that are used inside of Azure today are, pretty high-powered units, right? They're high-powered in terms of the CPU and GPU. So when you look at sort of the layout and what's included, you have this topology. So this is an example of the Media Composer workstation sitting on those VMs, the Nexus Cloud storage. And one thing to note about the Nexus Cloud storage is the fact that there's been a deep integration that happened there. So that is not a lift and shift of Nexus into Azure Blob Storage, but rather there's been significant engineering work. And then you have the clients all accessing through Teradici those Media Composer workstations, either from a thin client or a desktop. And then they're uploading that content up and down using File Catalyst. In terms of managing your edit on demand instance, this is what you're using, and you can click 2 more times there, David. And this is showing you your usage in terms of how much storage and or time that you've been using those VMs for Media Composer. So because you're allotted amount of time and an amount of storage and an amount of bandwidth with subscription on a monthly basis. If you do go over, by the way, you do not get charged for those overages. So if you do go over, basically on a consistent basis, we just make a recommendation that you upgrade to a higher package. We can deploy Edit on Demand as a service in all the regions you see on the screen today, and this is only going to increase. The key things that we need in order to deploy the service effectively are GPU-enabled VMs inside of Azure data centers, and so that's why you see those green check marks in the areas that we currently are deployed. And then, of course, Nexus availability, which, of course, the closer you get to it, the better the experience is going to be. So we've done several deployments. Also, as Craig alluded to, right, we've literally had hundreds of folks spin up instances, try it out, and use it for real live productions, including Gorilla, which was doing documentary film work. We have Jarrett Creative, who's been doing commercial work, creating commercials. France TV, who's doing digital first news production, as well as Televisa, who's done things like novellas and soap operas. So it's ideal for a number of different scenarios. So Gorilla, again, doing post. This is some of the examples of the work that they were doing, finishing production and doing also from their homes. One of the key things that they mention is the fact that they have not a ton of bandwidth to work with. So 20, 25 megabits, and they're getting a great experience. In terms of the workflow, just so you can click through all these, David, real quick. Essentially, they're using clients sitting at home, using Teradici, and then they're uploading the content using that File Catalyst. File Catalyst is then uploading that content into the environment. They're then putting that into a hot folder, and then they're editing it with Media Composer. And when they're done, they pull the project down, and they spin everything down. So I think it would be a good idea to just play back a video and hear from them what their experience was like.
The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, just moments ago announced the country will go into a complete lockdown. Most staff will be working from home.
Corona happened. Every edit suite in the building that's currently running needs to be out and about and being installed in everyone's house. To be honest, I don't think I've ever done anything quite like this.
Gorilla TV has been going for about 20 years now in Cardiff. We have 3 sites. We now have round about 100 Avid systems. We pretty much do all genres of post.
So Avid approached us with a new facility they have, Edit on Demand, which is basically cloud editing and cloud Nexus storage all combined into one service. So we did a week's demo, thought it was a fantastic new product, absolutely brilliant. Little did we know we'd actually be using it for real thanks to Corona. We needed editors to work remotely, quickly.
Everything pretty much happened in a week. We had lots of our clients just asking for us to move to editors' homes.
And Avid Edit on Demand from a technical aspect was no different really than any one of our edit suites here.
The editors didn't know that the Nexus was in the cloud. They actually thought they were remotely accessing into our system on-prem.
They said the responsiveness and the power and flexibility it gave them to do their edits pretty much anywhere they wanted.
Connecting to Edit on Demand was easy and straightforward. It's lightning fast.
In Wales and the UK in general, we don't have that great connectivity at home, yet everything works very well with the technology that we're using. We need to collaborate without geographical boundaries.
I would definitely recommend Edit On Demand. You forget that it's a virtual PC, you forget that you're streaming media from the cloud. It's fantastic.
From a remote working point of view, I can't think of any other facility that does what Edit On Demand does as well as it does.
All right. Well, there you go. So I know we're out of time. The last thing I'll mention, I will mention this real quick, David, is just client monitoring. Again, when using Edit On Demand, folks want to be able to look at the output. And so one of the ways in which we're enabling this is sending an NDI feed out of Media Composer to basically Zoom, and then using Zoom to look at that third monitor experience, right, and basically monitor output. And while it's not necessarily 100% color accurate and all that good stuff, it certainly suffices for quite a few use cases. And so this is one of the ways in which we're enabling that sort of third monitor experience. These are just other customer examples of folks who have used Edit On Demand successfully and the ways in which they've done it, and some of the different ways they're sort of accessing content and uploading and downloading content. So these are project examples. So real quick, what's coming soon? So, you know, just because the service is up and running doesn't mean we're going to stop innovating. We're going to be adding more and more features as we go along, including broader plugin support. So those of you who are used to using things like Boris Effects with Media Composer, we're going to continue to expand the ability to use more in terms of plugins. Better administration. So you saw an example of that administrative tool today, but it's certainly going to evolve and become much more dynamic and user-friendly. And then more as it relates to working with Nexus and managing the Nexus environments as they're deployed in the cloud, as you're used to managing them as if they were on-prem. So those are just some of the things that are coming soon. And with that, we'll take a few questions.
Yeah, so got a question here with the over the shoulder scenario.
Sure.
Where can people find out more information about some of those over the shoulder options, the remote preview, second person in a remote room scenario? Yeah,
so some of those are on avid.com. And then as we roll out formally some of the things we're doing POCs on, you'll also be able to find that also on avid.com. So I would just check avid.com, and if not, don't be shy, you can reach out directly to me. I'm just raymond.thompson@avid.com.
Avid.com. Thank you. Okay, so another one here on syncing of media to Cloud Nexus. How do we enable that? Moving from an on-premise solution to migrating content and assets onto a Nexus in the cloud?
So it's using File Catalyst. So File Catalyst is just an accelerated file transfer tool. It's a UDP-based tool set that basically pushes content very quickly from on-prem into the cloud. And then it's just a hot folder. So a hot folder is basically just something that Nexus is looking to. Anytime any new content gets added to the hot folder, it simply imports that into the Avid file system. So anytime it sees something new, it brings it in, and now it's available inside of the Media Composer. So you can access that content, edit it. You can have up to 30 people, by the way, using the service at any one given time. And that's another thing that we'll be continuing to evolve, is increasing the number of folks who can access Edit On Demand at one time. But today it's 30. And like I said, there's a package in terms of what you're using for bandwidth, storage, and compute in terms of the number of hours. So that's all part of the service. But accessing the content is all done, and uploading the content is all done today through File Catalyst.
All right. Well, thank you, Ray. It's really great to see the many ways that individual creatives, small teams, and even large enterprise organizations can enable remote production and editing.
Absolutely. It's an exciting service, and it's just the beginning. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time.